Hello Hero, it's Lucy Lannon, back with a quick pick a card reading for you, Toba, this time looking at your career and educational journey at the moment. So you could be just about to study, you could be in study, you could be in advanced study whilst working, you could be in the career of your dreams and you just want to know something about the environment you're in, or you could be looking to join a career path, not knowing quite where to go or having several options in front of you. It's really up to you. Let's see what we've got, shall we? Oh. So there's a sense of things going into crisis, definitely. I instantly got an image in my head when those came out of my friend who's in a very good career place at the moment but was recently incapacitated. So that might be you. You might have had a bit of a crisis around, I've picked the right thing, but now I can't do it for a bit, or I can't do it in the same way. We're just taking the top, I think. Yeah. This is the Twin Peaks Magician Longs to See Tarot, by the way, which is available directly from the seller, I want to say, but also on Etsy. And if you can find the guy who originally designed it, please do make sure your money goes to him, because it's fantastic. Ooh. Right. You'll see I tried to pull that one, and it was the one above it. That tells me that a choice is being made, which is not the sort of... the most obvious option is not the one to take. So if you are faced with a choice right now, it needs a bit further thought. If you were coming to this reading for like a confirmation of, yes, that's absolutely the right thing, I think you may be surprised, all right? Let's get the rest of it and then we'll talk through it properly, because I'm feeling full spread mode for this one, which I don't always do, but let me know what you prefer actually. Do you like it when I pick things out bit by bit, or do you like to see the whole outcome first, like this, and then to sort of hear my take on it as you look over the cards too? Right, I'm just going to pause and meditate on these. There'll be a quick cut, which you hopefully won't feel. Okay, so I'm going to work through the top line, and we're going to talk about what each one means, but then we're going to kind of clarify with this bottom line, because I think all of these speak back to the situation, but in order for you to know whether this is the right collective reading for you, because I'm reading generally and for a large audience, you'll need to know what this top thing actually is, right, and whether it applies. So with the Ace of Swords in reversed, there's been a cutting of ties to a certain situation. But what I'm feeling from this Eight of Cups appearing immediately afterwards is that it's not an emotional cut. Even if you've left a job, you've left a course, you've left a place, even for some of you, you've left a person with a view to career, I don't think that you are untied from it. It's almost like rather than saying the cord has been cut effectively with this sword, we're saying the cord has been untied, and almost like while you've been sleeping, it's raveled as opposed to unraveled. Come on, brain, it's late here. Sorry, guys. It's almost like the thread of that thing has woven itself around you again, right? I'm getting, just from this and from this, an image of someone who's like, right, job done, decision made, excellent, glad to leave that behind. And kind of in the night, the tentacles of that particular thing are wrapping around them and infiltrating the head and just sort of pulling them back or calling them. Or it makes me think of like the kid rapping on the window in Salem's Lot, which itself is an echo of Wuthering Heights. It's that kind of... you're being haunted, is what I want to say. It's very spooky. Very Halloween appropriate, but in an entirely professional or educational sense, whichever applies to you, and it may be a combo of both. I feel that you've tried to cut off from a certain pathway, and that what's happened as a result of that is that you've, in a practical, overt, public way, distanced yourself from your past. You know, switch jobs, change majors, something like that. They may come up again, sorry. Communication about this thing has been an issue as well. So it may be that you've had difficulty in telling people your real reasons for leaving for fear of some kind of repercussion. So you've cut ties in a very sort of direct way. But the emotional complications of the situation are still wrapping around you in some fashion. If you are of a magical ilk, please do cut those cords, in a visualization way or in a spellcasting way. That would be a positive thing to do right now. And if you're not able to do those things, that's not to scare you and say that it's absolutely necessary. It's just many of you are energy workers on the side, even if you have what society deems as proper jobs, right? I just feel there's a need to let go, even though you've let go. Then with this Nine of Wands, particularly with this scene of Dale Cooper having just been shot and one of the lodge spirits coming in to kind of thumbs up him and do pretty much nothing, it's a very long, protracted process. It's a scene that is incredibly frustrating to watch and carries simultaneously an air of humour and an air of deep sort of unease, right? We laugh when we watch this scene because it's very absurd, but we also feel, really though, the main character is bleeding out on the floor. And I think this speaks to kind of how you are right now, in that you're giving everyone the thumbs up for the changes that have been made, or a path that you've taken that seemed like a very good bet. But the reality of it is that you're kind of emotionally bleeding out or tired out, with it being a wands thing, which often speaks to energy levels. You're kind of burnt out, leaking. I'm hearing Skeksis going living essence, right? You're leaking essence out on the floor. And the response of the people around you who perhaps could help or step in is to go, job well done, excellent. How are you? You're on the floor. And other such useless things with long pauses. This may be because it's a confidentiality situation where you can't go to somebody directly without kind of risking information about another person being leaked out, because we do have a High Priestess reverse coming up later on. It could also be that you want to appear proficient on this outer level. You want to seem like somebody who's made these excellent choices for yourself, even if that's like in an early education sense where you're choosing colleges or something like that. And therefore you don't want to say to the people around you, help, I'm not coping, which is this feeling here. Because you actually sort of feel more there's a need to engage in small talk, I don't want to say howdy doody, but it's like, how's your father? Not how's your father? It's just really sort of surface stuff, because part of what I'm getting is that maybe this was a decision that not all people would agree with. Maybe you were in a position of stability, or you had chosen something to study which was very sort of stable, and you've gone off on your own in some way, in either, shifting to a different thing within that industry or within that university or other institution, to do something a bit more you, and people are calling it a risky bet and not everyone's supporting you. Or it's that you've cut ties completely with something and you know that there are people who would disagree with that, who are saying, thumbs up, I'll support you, whatever, particularly family I'm getting for some of you. But what you actually want to say to those family is, I'm not doing okay right now, can I have some help? And the position that you feel you're in is that there's no way of communicating with them, right? There's a distance between the ways that Dale communicates in the show and the way that the Lodge Spirits do. And again, you don't have to have seen Twin Peaks to understand this deck. I'm hopefully going to be sort of getting it across, but it does help if you know the scene, right? You understand this sort of uncanny valley feeling, and that may apply to you at the moment if this is your reading. Or you may have made a decision very sort of swiftly, because Swords is quite a fast moving energy, which has implications that are much more long term and much more difficult to deal with. What I also want to say is that you've made a decision logically, intellectually, with the mind, with the options available in a very concrete, maybe even statistics based or step-by-step process kind of a way. And yet it's immediately followed by a few cards actually that are all to do with the emotional or the inner life, the spiritual life, and the ramifications of that decision on you, the you in the middle, not the you that puts out content or functions or performs within a certain job context or as a student, but the you that has to live with these decisions long term and is sort of worried about who you're becoming or whether you went down the right road or if you did cut from something else. And if you're happy with that decision and it seems like a better bet for your kind of spirit, there's still a sense here that in leaving something behind, there's like a period of mourning or a period of slight confusion, settling into something new again, feeling a bit emotionally discombobulated. And you might feel, I did the right thing, but oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. Why do I feel weird? For some of you, and this is a very small group, this isn't a major change. This is just you making career decisions with nothing but logic. And the reason you're coming to a reading like this is actually that the emotional and spiritual cost of that decision has suddenly kicked in. And this is part of your, I want to say Saturn return if you're sort of around 28, 29, 30, or it's part of your awakening process to who it is that you really want to be, kind of in the middle of things. And that may not mean that you leave what you've chosen, but it certainly means that there are sides of you that will divorce from it in an intellectual sense in order to process the emotion and the sort of fears around what you might do instead and whether or not you're being adequately supported, because it's a card about healing, particularly in a battle situation or in a war, in a traditional sense. But in this particular context, it's about whether anybody is helping you in your own fight. And I don't want to use the term fight as if everything is a confrontation or to make pacifist people think in a warlike way. But what I mean is the fight for yourself, or the sort of reclaiming of who it is that you are, is somehow something that it's not under threat, but it's an exhausting process at the moment. Bear in mind as well that with this 8, if it was upright, it would be Dale again, but in a much more spiritual mode, out camping with Garland Briggs, looking for, I want to say they're looking for UFOs. And then Garland being called into the sort of lodge space, the supernatural realm, the realm of the spiritual, if you like, while Dale stays tending the fire by the tents, earthy, practical, doing the work, right? So for some of you, all of the stuff we're talking about has been kind of spurred on by somebody that you know of, whether that's a close person or someone you've sort of had experience with online or whatever, who has taken the decision to leave your kind of a realm as it is currently, and instead to follow the beat of their own drum in a more, what appears to be a more desirable way for you at the moment, right? So again, with shifting departments, shifting majors, that kind of thing, it may be that you've kind of seen someone else do it. And that crops up again later on with this, which was the first way I read it, right? So let's move on to this Page of Wands. This can be quite an entrepreneurial energy, but with it being a page, it's also like there's a sense of immaturity with it. I don't know whether you guys are into watching TV for spooky season, and I don't want to spoil too much, but I've been watching The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix. Highly recommend if you're into that kind of horror TV. And it makes me think of, I'm going to forget the character name, but the guy who throws the incredible party, the sort of younger of the siblings, that fancies himself as a global entrepreneur. And it's a very sort of, for my Parks and Rec people, it's a very entertainment 720 energy or whatever it is. But I mean, if you've seen that show, how that turns out, right? And it's not so positive, but it does come from these, on paper, good plans and big aspirations. And there's a sense within which there's that energy here of not quite knowing the territory clearly enough to make the impact that you want to make. And I'm not conflating your reading with the outcome of that fantastic episode. But what I am saying is that where he fell down wasn't in dreaming big, it was in collaborating and engaging in specifics in a very exacting way that he had no experience of at that point, right? So there is, I don't want to say that your decision itself is an immature one, but I certainly want to say that if you're seeing this reading, there is an energy of newness about this whole thing, and a kind of spirit of passion re-entering your life for something, whether that be your current, place, or whether it be something else. But there's a danger with it being a page that process is not fully thought through, and to kind of not get carried away with things. Indeed, that may be a danger you're already aware of, and that may speak to why there's a sense of unease, even though you know logically that you've made a correct decision here, or that this would be a correct decision. With the person in the background, I mean, obviously within Twin Peaks, this is the grandson, the magician, which also, my magic users, this may be a reading for you, but there's the grandmother in the background with the kind of gift, right? And there's, Garmin Bozier in everybody's hands and all that sort of stuff, so that may be relevant. Again, a sense of unease, a sense of trauma influencing a decision here, whether that's a trauma from your previous position work-wise, or just stuff you want to avoid in life in a bigger way. And if it is that bigger way, please check out the rest of the channel. Particularly recently, there's some stuff you may need to see. With it being the grandmother, again, there's all these cards with two people. And my first reading of it sort of on meditation was that you might be starting up something new with somebody. So if you're not an entrepreneur, this may be that you're changing departments because you know someone who already has, again, with the Garland Briggs thing, right? Or it may be that you're starting a company, and it's not that you're like one-on-one collaborating with a friend in an equal portion necessarily, but you've got someone lined up willing to be a secretary down the line, or you've got someone who's like, I'm really good at admin, shall I do that for you? Or something like that. Those of you who are still in higher education, this may be that you've switched majors or courses or something like that, and there is somebody that you know in the other course already, or you've decided to sort of abandon ship with a friend who has also gone, yeah, this wasn't what I thought it would be, but I can see myself here, let's go. And I think that sort of collaborative energy is softening the blow in some way, if there is a transition point. Or I think that if this is a near future thing and you're thinking of a transition, something you're considering is this other person's experience. And again, it could even be just someone online or something that's been telling you, hey, I dropped your former career and made X amount of money a day using this handy technique, or this course that only costs $999.99 for one day only. That kind of stuff. Or more sensible versions of that kind of stuff, which you've not taken the whole of, but has inspired you to go, you know what? I'm hearing the thing that Spirit told me. There's a word that we use up north where I'm from, and I don't know how widely used it is in the rest of the world. And it's thick, as in not thick like a thick tree trunk, and not thick like with two C's, but thick as in not very bright, like knock on wood because there's nothing there kind of thing. And I'm hearing like, there are people thicker than me, there are people less qualified than me who don't have to go through this and aren't doing what I'm having to do. So I'm going to drop what I was going to do, and I'm going to say, I'm more intelligent than a lot of the other people who I see broadening their horizons, shall we say. So like, why not me? Right? And I want you to be very careful with the energy of, if so-and-so could do it, then I can. Because it's not only kind of firing stuff at that person, which you wouldn't want fired at yourself energetically, which I think is always a bit risky. It's that sort of gossipy, quite mean-spirited energy that you don't want to fall into when making big decisions, because it indicates an underlying resentment about the position you've got yourself in so far. But there's also a sort of untruth to that, which is something like, I've been on the other side of this, to be transparent, where I am now a full-time tarot reader. I have been for a few years. I've also, through one magical means or another, come into enough money that I can live fairly comfortably. And in the rest of my life, that certainly wasn't the case because of a combination of disabilities and lack of privilege that was kind of already there. So there have been people that see me in a flexible schedule, in a nice job, meeting interesting people, wearing what I want, doing what I like with my hair, etc., who have expressed their resentment towards me, either in very obvious, very upfront ways or in sort of sabotaging ways. And that's been very painful to deal with. But what I want to say is that I only got to a place where I was kind of liberated from former circumstances to do that by doing the spiritual work, the magical work, the technical work of spending, over a decade learning one discipline every day for hours and hours. And the kind of work tapping into whether it was my purpose, tapping into whether, as well as being kind of convenient and nifty and a cool thing to do, it was something I could help other people with. And I think often when we find ourselves in careers or educational tracks or whatever it is, and believe me, I've been there, where you feel sort of trapped in the rat race in some way, or you feel that you're not, you feel that your path is disingenuous to yourself, even if it's financially or security-wise beneficial. There's a temptation then to sort of go, well, I'll do anything else and I'll just pick something that I'm relatively good at, and that's my point, that's my job. But I don't want you to confuse that with the vocational, right? For some of you, you will leave something which was very sort of acceptable on paper, and you will join something that is much more vocational, much more creative, allows for more scope, but also possibly allows for more criticism from the wider world. And that may be your purpose. It may be something really beneficial. But with this High Priestess in reverse appearing, and with my first impressions of this card, what I want to say is, don't mistake mobility for vocation. Don't mistake, I would prefer to live that lifestyle as a calling to a certain industry, particularly within a time that I would categorize as another magical revival, where at the moment there are certain industries that are quite trendy. And what they don't tell you in that sort of trendy bit is that it involves not just a lot of hard work. I'm not going to, patronize you with all that. That's obvious. But it also involves energetically dealing with other people in an unprecedented way that you simply do not get in any other industry, even healthcare, even education, right? It's a very difficult thing sometimes to manage. And I still sort of struggle with the energy management of it, both as an energy worker and as a disabled person. And I juggle that every day, and that's the bit you don't see. It's the bit I don't put on social media when I'm kind of flexing things that were very hard to achieve, right? So if you are looking to a more creative industry that is very in vogue at the moment, whether that be a magical one or other, I would caution you to speak to people in that industry about their daily grind and the realities of it, and particularly people who've been doing it a long time, right? I'm not talking the most fashionable people on whatever social media platform. I'm talking people who've been doing it decades and upwards, and have really sort of had to see in that industry the mirror of themselves, had to do the work on themselves in order to be held to help other people in a certain way, or in order to express themselves in a certain way if you are an artist. You might be drawn to my Artists, Writers, Witches reading that I did a few days back, which was another collective, if that speaks to you. Again, I'm not saying don't go forward into that, because I don't want to gatekeep what is an absolutely beautiful global stepping into things that have been indigenously persecuted, secreted, punished in all kinds of places historically. I like that it's now recirculating. I like that people do this more openly and safely. But what I want to say is, that if you're not meant to do something, you'll be booted out, right? And that may be quite dramatic, and that may make you wish that you'd stuck with the safety of something else until you truly decided that another field was right for you, from speaking to a wide variety of people about it. So, and again, that's not just, your cards are speaking to that in a general sense, not just if we're talking about magic or art or something like that, but more broadly with any industry that you want to step into that's less of a safe bet. Make sure that you're going there for the right reasons, and make sure that you're going to feel okay in that environment, right? And going to long-term thrive and be able to seek the professional development that keeps you interested as well. Because, yeah, an office job is boring, or a job that you don't like with your colleagues or whatever is boring. But in a job that's not boring, if you can't expand within that industry, or if it challenges you at times more than it gives back, it's still not going to be appropriate, right? There is no such thing, my dude, as a perfect job. And sadly, if you're watching this and you're in kind of a Western capitalist framework, whether or not you're in my part of the world, I'm guessing that you have to have a job, right? Because education and career readings aren't often watched by existing billionaires. So, I mean, if you are a billionaire, please donate, link down below. But you get my drift, right? We all have to do something, and no thing that anybody has to do is perfect. And I think the Page of Wands as a character speaks to the idealization of a lifestyle which actually may not be ideal in the pursuit of it. And I think you need to really ground yourself into I'm hearing pro-con lists, and I've been very Gilmore Girlsy today, so that may be a thing, but grounding yourself into the pros and cons of a particular industry or a particular shift or whatever, not to put yourself off something, and not to say you've made the wrong decision leaving something else, but instead to ensure that you're prepared at each stage for what there is to expect, and that you can do the best that you possibly can within an industry and express the most of yourself you can in your work or in your further education or whatever, as a result of that preparation and that full understanding of what there is out there. Yeah, I think that's what that is. Empress in reversed and this Four of Swords together are giving me a vibe of, I want to say, regret. And again, that's not to spook you if you've only just made a big change and it was looking promising, because I don't get the sense anywhere in this reading that it's a wrong decision so much as that it needs careful thought. But Empress is about abundance, and you see here it's Catherine Martell, who is maybe the second richest person in Twin Peaks. And then this Four of Swords depicting Leland, it's about rest usually, but in this it seems to be about this deep regret, this sort of realization of what came before, right? He's literally mourning his daughter in a very sort of dramatic way that he can't hold back anymore. So there's this sense that the money may not be flowing. Not to go into the second line too soon, but this one of Sheriff Truman is about having anxiety at night, right? So for those of you who shifted industries, perhaps the cash flow isn't all it's cracked up to be, and you're wondering whether actually you can pay the bills. Or if you've, changed majors or something like that, perhaps the workload is not what you expected. Perhaps your fellow colleagues are not who you expected them to be. There's something like that. I do think that rest is a crucial component of what you're going through right now. Whether that means that it would help lead to a resolution, because we've got a sleep card, a lack of sleep card, and then we've got Dale Cooper bleeding out on the floor, resting. So it's very much like all of this may be keeping you up at night, or it may be that in sort of contemplating all the factors we're discussing here, a good night's sleep or sleeping on a decision may be a really positive movement forward. And energetically speaking, there is definitely, not just at a biological renewal and brain renewal level, we all know the positive effects of sleep and the reasons to sleep, right? But in terms of energy work, often if something is really brutally coming at you, even in a protection sense, something really good that you can do is just kind of send it out there that an answer comes to you, or send a prayer out there, or send a ritual out there, or, you know, whatever it is that you do to protect, and then go to bed just for a little bit, right? If you have the luxury. So what I want to say, if you've not been sleeping at night, is if there's a moment, even if it's just 15 minutes at the end of your workday somehow, where you can lie down undisturbed, or sit in a chair in the office, hidden from your spouse and or children, with something over your face, and just get like a nap that's not even really a sleep, I think that will help immensely. For any of you who do affirmation work or work on self-concept or anything like that, looping stuff whilst in meditation for 15 minutes or so a couple of times a day, as well as doing whatever else you do, is being indicated here. It's just stepping back for a second to say, this is the time that I'm allocated for my body to recharge and my head to not think about this, to not process this, right? That's why we meditate. It's to turn things off so that stuff can arrive. We're not tapping into a broader consciousness because meditation is some kind of direct line. We're tapping into everything that's already there because we're shutting up for a minute. We're stopping the thoughts, we're stopping the input, we're turning off the devices in order to say, whatever's here layered upon my current reality, I am now in a consenting space to receive it. And it's sometimes that intention that brings in, you know, everything from visual weirdness to guidance to the answers to your prayers, right? If you're not meditation minded, or you're not sort of a practitioner or of a spiritual inclination or anything, the nap thing, right? Seriously. Didn't they... I feel like it was someone at NASA or something, but you can correct me down below if you know. But there was a thing published a couple of years ago about how 23 minutes exactly was the optimal time for a nap, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to be able to fall asleep in under 23 minutes. It just means that when they did comparative studies of different time periods, that was the one that seemed to allow for the brain to kind of fully recover and for the body to recharge genuinely. And then it was like, right, we can get back to it. So what I want to say as well, for those who work for yourself, if you do something like a Pomodoro thing where you do a task for a certain set amount of time and then you have a 5-minute break or whatever, at the end of that stack, put a 23-minute nap, right? If you can, if you're able. I know that being able to rest when you want is a privilege. And I know that if you're in a financially tricky situation, you may also be in an environment where you can't rest and where there's no privacy. But for those who are able to do that, even if it's on a commute or something like that, absolutely recommended here. And like I say, the general indication is a worry about whether this is going to leave you in a position of practical stability. The Empress upright would be positive Taurian energy. It would also depict a character in this sense that has the backdrop of a working factory, which is arguably the kind of financial epicenter of a town, right? And I know that things happen to the mill, and I know that in the third season, things change geographically and it's no longer that kind of a thing. But where we see Catherine Martell involved in the Twin Peaks universe, we see the mill as being almost the palace of the kingdom, right? It's the place where the riches are, or where they sort of circulate through or from. So to have that in a blocked position tells me that either money's not coming in, or that you are deathly afraid that it won't, right? Emphasis on deathly afraid, because we're at gravesite over here. So let's get a bit more about each of these aspects of the situation, because I think if you're still here by the time you're seeing this bit, it's definitely you, right? You haven't clicked off. So Ten of Pentacles in reverse. This is really interesting because I think this is Civil War Ben. Yeah, it is. What a scene. What an arc, right? So we have okay, Ten of Pentacles reversed is usually about concerns around legacy, possibly inheritance, possibly progression, worries about whether you will get to mastery within a particular discipline or professional environment, concerns that you're not cut out for something. With it being Civil War Ben, it's very like the most powerful person in the town, the only person more powerful than Catherine, goes into a delirious state and begins to think that he's living in the American Civil War and singing songs and making the people around him dress in relevant outfits and join in. His psychotherapist in the show enables all of this as a sort of out is through maneuver to hopefully snap him out of it, which is successful in the end, but may not be recommended practice in this day and age. I say all of that to say that you've seen the mighty fall, right? I think there are anxieties for you around figures who made better choices than you in whatever sense, be they choices that are more true to themselves or choices that are more financially practical, logically beneficial, statistically sort of acceptable, I guess, within the career sphere. And you have seen those people have bad experiences as well. And it's sort of like, or maybe this is a response to what I just said here, right? Like, if people who are even sort of a long way into doing what it is that I want to do are having trouble with money, or they're failing, or they're experiencing that the job has its own set of side effects or things that aren't so desirable sometimes, then, it's kind of a what the fuck. It's a sense of like, yes, I've made a decision. Yes, I've cut ties. But again, is this the correct thing? Does this damage my legacy? Sorry if you hear creaking, by the way. I've had to open the curtains and it's I have like French doors that are going, but it's kind of bringing a lovely breeze. Very refreshing, very appropriate to swords. So apologies for any rain noises, creaking, etc. Now what else do I want to say about this? The other thing to sort of confirm what we have been saying is that in this deck, the pentacles depicted, rather than being coins falling on the sort of older experienced man, they are tokens from One-Eyed Jacks, right? The gambling institution, amongst other things. So this is, I want to say for some of you, particularly if it hit about the House of Usher stuff up here, you might have people in your life who think that this is a gamble to the extent that you will just invite in other gambles, right? You may come from, I want to say like a strict family background or an early environment or a friend environment in some way that are like, well, if you switch to a creative industry, you'll be, doing heroin and getting caught with hookers within 2 weeks, and I will disown you. There's certainly a sense of judgment from the outside which is not proportionate, and with this being a sort of fantasy, a delusion of Ben's, it's not connected to reality, right? This is this person's fantasy, and I say that because fantasies can sometimes be dreams we don't want to come true, right? We can go off into elaborate imaginative realms about stuff that we fear happening, almost to kind of prepare ourselves for the eventuality that it might happen, which I would never sort of encourage as an affirmational exercise, but some people function like this, right? So you may be under the gaze of a concerned friend, a worried mother, a former colleague who doesn't understand your decision, who is weighing in a way that paints you as taking risks in a more general way, as gambling on your lifestyle, wealth, health, relationship, friendships, stability in a more general sense by shifting focus to something else. And as much as I've made my own sort of warnings and caveats up here, and we've discussed that stuff's a bit draining right now, what I don't want you to do is agree with this person, because the fact that this clarifies this shows me that they're not coming in with logic. They're coming in with fear, wearing the mask of logic, right? You see now why it linked into the Fall of the House of Usher stuff. I feel that this person feels they're being helpful, that they're being logical, that they're basing their opinions of this on facts, on life experience even. But it's not really relevant to your world, my dude, so don't take too much of it on board, okay? And I know that's really difficult if it's like a formative figure or a caregiver or something like that, but I'm here to tell you, sometimes they be talking shit too, okay? That said, they may back up the perspective that you had or the logics that you had about stuff. They may agree with components of your decision. Or if you are feeling trapped currently, and this is all consideration, they may be an influence on how you came to this stable position in which you feel burnt out and relatively unstable underneath, like low key. And I think that their reasonings, where they match with yours, are okay, yeah, I get it, it's solid. But then they also sort of put that sword into this fantasy world, right? It comes from the grounded mountain place here, which is this very 10th house, very sort of Capricorn, climbing the ladder bit by bit, professional progression energy. That's just rolled off into a 4. So this is confirmation that it's family for most of you. But, you know, it came from that mountainous grounding, mountain goat thing of I will get there, I will get there. And it went into sort of a Neptunian fantasy realm of, oh God, but if you do this one thing, which actually was being very thought out, the whole world will fall on your head and everything will be terrible and you'll lose everything else you've accumulated. And I always knew you were bad at decisions anyway, is what I'm hearing for some, particularly if that person in your life has a relationship to control and control over you, because they couldn't have full control in their own career or in their own history. Now, what I don't want to happen is that those of you who are a bit younger or a bit more sort of antagonistic to this person, whoever they are, go up to them and say, you're just telling me that I can't do X, Y, Z because you're full of shit, because you did this and you spent all your life with this person doing nothing, or you went into this industry and hated it or whatever. That's not what I'm saying, right? What I'm saying instead is sometimes you can have a secret understanding, that the perspectives you're getting are coming from a place more to do with that person than they are to do with you. And if you've never reframed your key advice giver as somebody who has their own backgrounds and biases, then it might be time to consider what those are and how they have influenced your decisions to this point and may influence yours in the future, right? What will you take from their benefit of experience? What will you leave behind? How can you break, for some of you, generational patterns when it comes to fears about work and wealth and fulfillment? Going into generational patterns, we've got Donna here in the 6 of Cups reversed, clarifying this 8 of Cups. So again, this is speaking to an emotional worry that is linked to a sense of nostalgia around something or a connection to kind of early life. For many of you, this is just directly clarifying what I just said and why we got the 4. For others, where it's not a familial person weighing in, I suspect that there's an element of nostalgia in either what it is that you're going towards that may be sort of disproportionate to how useful this thing would be, or to what it is that you chose in the first place that you're now like, actually, a lot of that was tied in with my origins and my background and how I grew up, and I think I'm ready to leave it behind. Just to step back for a moment, something that is key to the House of Usher stuff and key to Pentacles, as I've said, is this idea of inheritance. So if you've been having a threat from somebody that you might not receive full inheritance if you do reckless things, this is your confirmation. And I think you need to look at that person, or any person willing to say things like that to you, as a negative influence for now on your well-being, whether or not they're doing it out of consideration and out of a kind of misguided way of expressing love, or expressing that somebody in your life may have wanted something different for you, be they here now or not. The other thing with kind of legacy and inheritance and this stuff is that some of you will have gone into a family business, or at least a related industry, and this whole reading is you kind of coming out of it and being like, you know what, that was my mum's thing or my dad's thing or their grandparents' thing or whatever, and I'm not feeling it for me, and I made my contribution to it, but my spirit, my wands, is elsewhere. And I just want to say, like, the 6 can be a very beautiful giving energy sometimes. And with it being in reverse here, yes, it does point backwards to nostalgia. It also points to unfair power dynamics within family units and withdrawals of form of privileges in a sort of underhanded way. But it also can sometimes speak to looking back, knowing that you couldn't have done it another way with the information that you had, and forgiving that past self for going down the path that you went down out of what seemed to be either nostalgia or pressure, and receiving from the universe that sort of Smith-Waite image of the bunch of flowers given to the other person, right? It's almost like a well done for unpicking that this was an ancestral puzzle, not a professional one for some of you. And that you don't have to be exactly like everyone who came before you, because your gift is as important as their legacy was, right? If you are part of a lineage which all did the same thing, and that doesn't have to be a House of Usher rich people thing, it could just as easily be that all of you were in care or nursing or something like that. Really examine what it is that appeals to you about following in those footsteps simply because other people did it, and whether actually that mindset has been blocking what makes you wonderful. It's interesting that we talked earlier about what I had to do to be able to get to what is always sort of argued to be a cushy situation or an easy life in, you know, doing what I'd like to do here. A big part of my unblocking, and indeed a financial unblocking for me, was conscious work on what I believed my family wanted me to be versus how I believed I could help others. And when I unpicked that and went, oh God, I don't want to repeat a pattern here, even though I love these people, even though I respect these people, even though I respect all of their industries and their perspectives. When I finally understood that I was just as valuable in a different industry, in a different lifestyle, in a different way of presenting myself, a different kind of set of friends, a different kind of schooling, all of it, and I had just as much worth doing my job in those realms as they did in their more respected circles, shall we say, that was the thing that unlocked it. And I suddenly had the money to do it. And I suddenly had, you know, somebody coming into my life who then influenced me in where I was going to do it and how, and supported me along the way. And there were all of these kind of domino effect things that led to me being here and now reading for you. And in a, you know, city that I love, and studying a professional astrological, sorry. Again, communication may be a thing in this reading. You know, it's all very cushy on paper. It's all very easy on paper. But what got me there was breaking a pattern not unlike this thing that you're dealing with, right? So don't make the mistake of thinking that because the perspective coming in is a practical, grounded one, a real talk, right? The work that you do to unbind yourself from it can't be a bit more ephemeral, a bit less, okay, what are the logical pro-cons, and a bit more in the realm of, if I really think about this, if I really feel into this, with your Cups card, what is my impression of my role in my life, right? For many of us, our career is the way that we express our job in the world, in the universe, in life, the most readily. That doesn't mean for a second that it's the only way you express those things. And for many people, they actually leave their careers before they're able to express fully who it is that they are and to really change other people's lives and stuff. I mean, for some of you, this cutting ties may be, I'm leaving career to have a family, to pursue, confirmation. Sorry, I get hiccups when that happens. It may be, I'm leaving a professional setting to pursue loving people the most that I can love them, raising a child, being a good husband or a good wife or a good partner, being a better artist by not being in an environment that crushes my ideas, etc., etc., right? This can be very nuanced because it's for a lot of different people, but you get my point. It's like, sometimes identifying the career that makes you you is the first step to understanding purpose, but the purpose and the career are not necessarily synonymous. So bear that in mind as well, that if you are cutting ties with something, it doesn't mean that that thing defined you and that you're no longer that person. It just means that you have a broader invitation to the universe to expand your self-definition. For many of you who are identified by other people within an industry as a matter of the family legacy and as a matter of pride, it may be a particular emotional burden, spiritual burden, a knock to your pride, a shot to the stomach, right, so the sacral center, solar plexus center, the confidence, the ego, to have people suddenly weigh in and say, oh, well, I was proud of you when you were this person, or when you followed in the steps of whoever. I don't know what you think you're doing now. And that may be your blockage. But if it is, this reading is your nudge to be like, really think on that, right? Do you want the approval of people who think that way? Does that vibe with what you feel you're here to do? And when I say here to do, again, I'm not necessarily talking an educator or a surgeon or an artist or a musician or whatever. It can be as simple as, my overall purpose is to bring beauty to other people in everything I do, every movement I make, and every bit of whatever I put out there. And you can do that as a security guard working nights. You can do that as a janitor. You can do that as a tech billionaire, right? This is what I mean about the job is like the first rung of the ladder to figure out who you are. It's not the whole thing. So if you lose the identity of a former career, of a former path within education, that doesn't erase the whole you. Far from it. It in fact gives you a further clue to what it is about where you want to be and what it is about where you were that have something in common. That may be the thing to unlock the most. Chariot in reverse with this. So we've got an echo of this energy of stagnancy. We've got been stuck in one place. And then we've got the sort of Laura and Maddie, two sides of the same coin thing. So again, this is like splitting into two people, presenting as two different people. One of them is sort of beloved, but in a tragic way of like, oh no, it's a shame what happened to. And then one of them is beloved in a sort of studious, amiable, oh wonderful, she's here to visit, talk of the town type way. So that may speak to you having this persona that was very comfortable where you once were, and a persona where those people that you may have had to sort of disappoint in some way are going, oh, what a shame, what a shame. But it's not a shame. Fuck them. With this being James Hurley as well, he's not my favourite character, but what I'm pulled to say is that you've always been cool, right? James has always been cool. It's repeated throughout, sometimes to the great irritation of fans, and it even made its way to the third season 25 years later, because he was always cool in his own way. I nearly said cool then, in like a, that may be the way one of you says it. That's not me at all. That was extremely cringy to say. But yeah, there's some kind of, it's not just you've always been cool. I'm not like talking about whether other people find you appealing in that sense. I'm talking about you've always had a sense of the direction to move in, right? You've always been cool. And from Spirit appearing here and here, we've always had your back, right? Moving into the High Priestess, we've always secretly had your back. It's you who makes the decisions, who drives the chariot, who decides which self you want to be, pulled in two different directions, but you've always been cool. You've always been all right. James is the antithesis of Leland crying here. It doesn't matter the money that's coming in or the circumstances he finds himself in. To some people, James is always cool. He's always taken care of. He's always all right. And actually, in the sort of, without spoiling the third season for those who haven't seen it, and you really should, it's fantastic, as is Fire Walk with Me and all the rest of it. But James's sort of end of his arc, where the show almost loops back round on itself in a narrative echo, his always been coolness is one of the things to kind of save the world, right? To erase the element that was in Twin Peaks that caused all of the tragedy in the first place. At least to a certain point, and we won't get into that because of major spoilers. Moving to the High Priestess, the Log Lady. You may feel that your explanation about this undertaking to others either has to be cryptic, has to be secret, or is cryptic because you are explaining it in the way that you receive and understand it, which is a very Margaret thing, but that other people are not necessarily getting what you're presenting, right? Think of the Log Lady introductions to the entire series and how they make sense to David Lynch, they make sense to fans who are long-time fans and have seen the whole thing and watched it back again and again. But if you're watching the show for the first time, the Log Lady intros make you go, you what? And often reference things that don't become relevant for several episodes or are oblique because they are referencing multiple aspects of a character and some of those things haven't been revealed. It's a very cunning use of language, emphasis on the word cunning, in case you are of a magical ilk, right? But I want to say that this is you verbally tiptoeing around things, keeping things quiet, maybe even for some of you, keeping your decisions secret. Notice as well, this is a really interesting depiction of Margaret because as well as being great with the sort of traditional High Priestess setting, she is in the, what's it called? The Ghostwood. She has one foot in the entrance to the Black Lodge, right? Or at least to the waiting room, depending on what you believe. So yes, High Priestess, one foot in the other world, that's very clever, but also this is like you having one foot in the idea that this could be a disaster. Think again of the thing that came into my head from the other TV show, right? It did not end well for the entrepreneur, without giving too much away. And I think this is you sort of dipping your toe in the water to see if the water is, you know, burnt engine oil, to see whether it's blackness, whether it's not just obfuscation of a potential future, but whether it's actually bad news, right? So part of the reason you may be being secretive is that. She also has her hands on the log, which seems to impart to her the wisdom that she's getting. So this is you tapping into a material source or a material thing in order to tune into your gut instinct. What do I mean by that? You might be looking online at statistics of people in different industries, a very material thing, to make a very ephemeral decision. Or you might be writing in a physical journal, a material object, in order to tap into the spiritual links of this, to your purpose, to your mindset, to your ancestry, all of that. Something that I didn't mention, which I should have, is that I do have a purpose reading in my shop. It's beneficial if you know your North Node, but if you don't, that's absolutely fine. You can have it anyway. And it is a much more deep dive than anything I do on the channel into how you might express yourself best in the world, how you might best achieve your purpose without locking you into a particular career or mode as a person or whatever. It's kind of, you know how we said that purpose isn't necessarily profession? It's tapping into that. It's the Crowleyan true will, for those who know what that is. And sort of doing a reading to tap into how you might go about expressing that, or finding it even for some of you. So that will be available when the shop reopens on the 22nd of October. So save the link in the doobly-doo. If not, there are other things that speak to that on the channel, but in nowhere near as much depth, right? So if you're at a position of higher education or early career, or you're just sick of the career you chose and you want to completely revamp, and you're thinking, but what am I for? Like, what is my mission on this planet? What am I meant to put my focus on? Where do my skills lie? Where do my weaknesses lie? That is the reading for you, okay? That's enough self-promo. Let's move on slightly. The Empress is clarified by the Nine of Swords we've pretty much got. But again, because this is a deck where we don't have the astrological info traditionally depicted in the Nine, what I want to say is that you may feel divorced from spirituality at this time. This may be the first reading you've watched on this subject, or you may be feeling like if you watch a lot of readings, not all of them are hitting. Or you're cut off from your gut instinct, right? This may be why the material manifestation of the tapping into the gut, the tech to get you there in a magical sense, right? That's what ritual is. That's what magic is. You do a load of theatrical performative stuff to get you to the place that your intention would have gotten you to otherwise, right? Because sometimes you need that extra step of the talismanic stuff and the contacts and the working vision and all the rest of it. So if that speaks to you, that might be why this has come up here. I'm also noticing Sheriff Truman has been drinking. So for those of you who resonated with the stuff about sleep, cut down on your alcohol content, or make sure that you're not drinking anything stimulating or sugary late into the night. You know, maybe have a cut-off point for alcohol, fizzy drinks, Red Bull, you name it, and just stick to that and see whether things improve in that realm. What else do I want to say about this? I feel like there was something I lost track of then. Come back. Come on. It's flown away. It's important to note as well, this is Truman at his low point, but he does have useful allies around him. He has Coop, he has the Bookhouse Boys. So this is an indication, particularly as he's facing away from the familial stuff, that there are people to talk to in a practical sense, right? There are people to draw upon. I'm also going to do a pick a pile when I have the time and energy in the next couple of weeks while I'm doing Youtober, about the resources that are available to you, be they people or things to read, things to look at, whatever. So do subscribe and hit the bell if that interests you as well. The thing that I lost has now flown back to me again, thank you. And that's the, how do I say this? If you've been watching a lot of tarot, because that was what I initially thought of, Chromecast at the Rising Moon has spoken about this in great depth and with more eloquence than I can. So do check out her channel if you haven't. I'll link her down below if I remember. But there is a sense that you can get addicted to tarot readings. And not all tarot readers will tell you, because we need to make money. But I feel kind of ethically obliged to say it's more common with love readings because it sometimes speaks to attachment issues, codependencies, unresolved childhood traumas, etc., that are sort of manifesting in relationship patterns that are not great. And a lot of the sort of backlash against the twin flame community is about those things, and how people can get stuck in borderline abusive situations because they are watching more readings than they are doing processing about what their situation actually is, right? So that may be relevant if you've also been to me for love readings before. But what I want to say is that it's not just in a relationship realm, because tarot is this nifty thing that tells you about yourself and speaks to your immediate needs in the sort of 6 needs that we've talked about before on the channel of certainty. It has a similar effect for the psyche as filling out a journal or a planner in a very precise way, or kind of getting addicted to that planning for the future mentality, in the illusion that seeing your future tasks, seeing your future potentials, seeing the situation in a more in-depth way than you might be able to see it with a mundane glance, gives you more control. But as we know from the planner analogy, not everybody in the planner community is actually that sort of high functioning and proficient. Many of us are procrastinators, and we fill out planners about the selves that we wish we could be, right? Excuse me, confirmation again. And not necessarily about the selves that we are and the skills that we have, or the energy levels that we have, right? So in a similar way, this thing of certainty with tarot, whilst obviously I wouldn't be a tarot practitioner if I didn't have a great deal of respect for it, as being, you know, a few hundred years expression of a much older art of tapping into the self, the environment, the unseen, the layers of reality, and figuring stuff out in an incredibly therapeutic way, which had its own influence on modern disciplines like psychotherapy. You know, all of that is obvious because I'm a tarot reader and I love this shit. But also, it's something which makes people feel like they have a grasp over the future, and you can fill out that planner in the same way, right? You can get so many readings that you kind of get an impression of what's happening for you, and you feel that either you don't have to put in the work to get to that place, or that it's too long a road and you go into a kind of despair and depression if you're getting timing readings, or that because that bit is taken care of and you know what work to do, you have the illusion of having done the work. Again, see my artists, writers, witches, spiritual practitioners reading, even if you're not in that community, because this speaks about the illusion of progress that you get from spiritual acknowledgement, which is not the same thing as doing the work, particularly if it's shadow work, particularly if it's really hard to figure out or hard to do, or the stuff that's hard to admit to yourself and that takes a lot of shit out of you. You know, when I say I did this ancestral work and it unlocked my finances and all the rest of it, I didn't say that work was fucking easy. It, you know, for months and months of it, it made me hate myself. For later portions of it, once I'd sort of forgiven a load of stuff, it made me hate some other people for doing some really, you know, underhanded things that I hadn't seen at the time. It made me question societal values, and therefore made me reevaluate the people that I was around. You know, it's a very difficult process to do these things, and I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying that sometimes we think we're skipping doing it by watching lots of readings. And for some of you, that's what you've been doing. And I'm here to say, take a tarot time out, but subscribe first. Don't shoot the messenger. Thank them for the message before you go do the thing, yeah? Again, it won't apply to everybody because not all of you are frequent tarot viewers. Not all of you know me. Not all of you sort of fully subscribe to tarot if you're coming here for a more practical reading. But just for some of you, part of your kind of sleepless nights and all the anxiety and stuff is that you've put so much focus into what is in the end a disassociative freeze response of over-consuming things like readings and guidance, that you've then taken the focus off you seeing what makes you happy, seeing what you want to do. If I wasn't here to tell you about any of this, and if none of the readers you might be subscribed to were, you would still need to have a good day-to-day sense of what makes you happy in your core in order to make the right decisions about your career and indeed your purpose. Sometimes you just have to switch off. And when we spoke earlier about rest, about meditation, we mentioned turning off of devices. For you, that may mean cutting back on tarot specifically, okay? I say it with love and with the hope that when you've sort of got to know yourself a bit better and feel that sense of the need for certainty being satisfied in other more controllable ways, that you do come back to me and to this channel and whatever. And I want to make it really explicit that I'm in no way saying that tarot is for people who are weak or who need certainty or who lean on it in an unhealthy fashion all the time, because these are the kinds of accusations levelled against this, you know, very old discipline in ways that absolutely make my blood boil, and are usually levelled at us by skeptics who've never had a reading in their life, whatever they say. So I don't want to be part of that crowd. I think that there is absolutely value to all the information you've accumulated up to now, right? But this is me also bringing value by being your stopping point, if that applies to you, and saying, maybe hold back on that stuff and take a more self-focused approach from a non-general perspective, right? Because readings on tarot, I was going to say TarotTube, YouTube, are general, right? They apply to a lot of people. And you want to get really specific to you. This is about you. This is about the rest of your life, your decisions, your purpose, stuff that is unique to you as an influence or as input, which, you know, without booking privately with someone, it's difficult to understand. And I also don't want you to get into the habit of doing private bookings again and again, because they are unique and they are tailored, and then realising that you've done more spending money on that work than you have done work to change your life. It has to be a balance, my dude. That's the other thing, actually, that's missed about the impression of this career, is that the majority of my day is not spent in a psychic trance state. The majority of my day is spent editing, uploading, doing admin, replying to people, seeing what other people are up to, doing my accounts, right? Doing my taxes. There has to be a balance, is what I'm trying to say. Bring that fantastic emotional onesie energy into the intellectual and the physical. And that is when the money starts to flow in. With the Hermit clarifying Leland in the Four of Swords, I think that there is a need for solitude, right? Because it's this character. I think you need to cut back from all influence, and that may be energetically what I was speaking to with this stuff about tarot. If you're not a tarot nut and you're not watching lots and lots of them and completely obsessed with the discipline, as I am, you know, as many of us enthusiastically are, it may just speak to you having all of these swords of intellectual influence pushing into your decision. And they can be, you know, people you know, family, YouTube, employers, former employers, people who may or may not give you a good CV, people who may or may not accept you into their institution, friends on a course, you know, you do you. But it's like it's all mounting up all the time. There's all this cultural feedback about what you should be doing. And there isn't you just looking at the growth with this plan of what's important to you, right? This guy has the best greenhouse in Twin Peaks, which is its own version of the Martell success. He may not have the most money circulating through his factory, but he has this botanical exemplary thing going on, which is part of his mission. So again, we're speaking about personalizing mission here. And then, like I say, plants, particularly in a magical context. Hello, Althea. Send Althea some love if you're seeing these leaves. I'm going to turn her so that you can see more of her. She's always fantastic in these readings. She balances me out and she sort of helps me to... I always look at her if I'm like trying to receive a message and she brings stuff in. She's really bloody lovely, so do send her all your love. I love all my plants, but Althea is a kind of co-companion on this journey, I think. Anyway, the point is that, especially magically, these guys are helpers in flourishing an idea. You quite often plant something, particularly in like Wicca and stuff like that. You will plant a seed to, help a certain relationship to flourish while that plant does, or to plant an idea in someone's mind or whatever, right? I mean, there's a reason that Inception even uses that language, isn't there, of planting an idea. So I think you've got this seed of who you can become that has expressed itself as feeling a bit fraught and as of changing things and possibly cutting ties, or at least thinking about it. But what you haven't allowed for yet is the flourishing of that particular thing, is the watering of it. And something that I want to say is, don't dig up the seeds to see whether they're sprouting. Don't excavate the things that have seemed very true to you about this, the gut impressions that you've definitely received, to see whether they mean more, right? If you feel something's not for you, that's the seed. Don't dig it up in order to examine why. Don't pick it apart to the extent that it's no longer an idea. Take that as the bit that's whole and that you can trust, and then work on nourishing the soil around it to say, right, I have this doubt, or I have this change, or I have this sense that I'm meant to do this thing. What is it environmentally, intellectually, and emotionally that I can do to water that until it gets bigger on its own, so that I don't have to dissect it? I can just kind of, sorry, Althea, I can just, help it to flourish and become its own thing, and then it will tell me what it is. You will know the plant once it's a plant. There's no point taking the seed apart to find out. Yeah? And that speaks to this lack of rest, or this feeling of regret, or whatever. I want to say to you, don't be in regret. Don't be looking towards the past about all of this that's happened so far. In having these considerations, these worries, these senses of different factors coming in such a complex way, you're already doing so well. You're already doing a fantastic job, particularly if you have to break away from some conditioning in order to admit these truths, or to take these steps, or whatever. Wherever there's any kind of dissent fired at you from anybody, I think it's incredibly courageous to do this kind of work and look at yourself and go, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Am I fulfilling other people? Am I making other people happy? Or am I in an environment that leaves me so grumpy that I turn everyone away, right? Because that can be the other thing. This isn't just about you. This is about infectious enthusiasm coming from you because you're in your right purpose, your correct stream of life, right? So that everybody you meet is enlivened by you rather than depleted. So that the energy people get from you is one of fulfillment and hope that they could do the same thing, rather than one of negation, stress, grumpiness, burnout, feeling like you've got too much going on, feeling like you're lashing out at people, And all of those things, by the way, are signs that you're probably not in the right place. And that's a good thing to know. It's not a tragedy. It's not something to mourn. It's a wonderful, valuable piece of information that can add to your bravery, because you have it as the seed in the middle. You have this spark of courage now. And that, Page of Wands, and he's got a spark here happening. That's kind of what to carry forward in this entrepreneurial way. It's not necessarily even the plan that you've made in the way that you've made it. It's the sense that at the core of you is a spark that something else is looking better. And that will grow into a flame, right? Flames meaning passion. So I hope that all of that was useful to you. If it was, please like, ding the dong, subscribe. Thank you kindly. I'm a tiny, tiny channel. I'd love to get really big. I've had a long time away for a bereavement and come back doing full Utober. So if you haven't checked out the rest of the channel, there's 70-something readings up there as I speak. And there will be more over the course of the next few days. And then I'll go back to probably twice a week or maybe 3 times a week schedule, depending on the level of sales coming in as well. So it's worth sticking around. There's playlists of A to Z psychic lucky dips. There's love readings, there's money readings, there's family and friends readings. There's don't know what you're going to get before it starts readings, ink divination, channeling direct, you name it. Go and have a look. Unless you're watching too much tarot, in which case, subscribe but don't click the bell, and I'll see you when you're ready. All right, take care. And trust yourself.